The for sale sign appears on their lawn like a wound. Fresh red letters against white. Hammered deep into grass, Harold Winters has cut every Saturday for 40 years. Margaret stands at their bedroom window, one hand pressed to the glass, watching their eldest son Bradley's Mercedes disappear down the street. The October morning light catches the tears she won't let fall. Not yet. Not until she understands how the deed to their home could simply vanish from a family trust, like smoke, like trust itself. In this modest two-story colonial, where they raised 3 children, where every mortgage payment stub still fills a shoebox in Harold's closet, the Winters face an impossible truth. Their own children are stealing their home. Bradley claims the deed was improperly filed decades ago. Patricia insists they need professional care. Tommy won't return their calls, but when a young notary named Rosa Gutierrez arrives to witness what should be routine paperwork, she sees something the children missed. The sharp intelligence in Margaret's eyes, the steady precision in Harold's questions, the way they reach for each other's hands when Bradley raises his voice. Have you ever wondered what you would do if the people meant to protect you became the very ones you needed protection from? When family becomes predator, when age becomes weapon, when your own memories are called into question. Stay with us to witness how 2 people in their 70s, armed with nothing but 4 decades of canceled checks and an unlikely ally who remembers her own grandmother's tears, take on a conspiracy that reaches deeper than family betrayal. Because sometimes the most powerful evidence isn't what disappears, it's what remains. Waiting patiently in a county vault, remembering everything that others would prefer to forget. The pill organizer sat on the kitchen counter like a small white accusation, each compartment labeled in Margaret's careful handwriting. Monday through Sunday, morning and evening. She filled Harold's diabetes medication while he read the newspaper at their kitchen table. His reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, the way they had for 40 years of breakfast rituals. The doorbell rang at 9:15. Margaret's hand hesitated over the pills. Too early for the mail carrier, too precise for neighbors who usually called first. Harold folded his newspaper with the methodical care he brought to everything. Tax returns, lawn care, the weekly grocery list he'd maintained since his retirement. I'll get it. Your blood sugar is fine. He squeezed her shoulder as he passed, a gesture so familiar she almost missed it. Through the kitchen doorway, Margaret watched Harold open the front door, watched his face shift from curiosity to something harder to read as their eldest son stepped inside without invitation. Bradley hadn't visited in 6 months. Margaret counted these things automatically, the way she'd tracked scraped knees and missed curfews when he was young. He wore a suit that probably cost more than their monthly grocery budget, and he carried a leather portfolio that looked new. We need to talk. Bradley's voice had the practiced warmth of his real estate commercials. About the house. Margaret's hand found the counter edge. Harold stood straighter, his accountant's posture asserting itself. The deed has vanished from the family trust. Bradley set the portfolio on the coffee table where Margaret kept library books and Harold's crossword puzzles. The one you transferred to me 15 years ago when I became trustee. There's no record of it. That's impossible. Harold's words came out flat. We have copies. Copies don't matter if the original filing was improper. Bradley opened the portfolio, revealing documents that seemed to multiply as he spread them across the table. These papers transfer the house to my protection temporarily while I resolve the issue. Just a precaution. Margaret moved to the living room doorway. Bradley still hadn't looked at her. That absence of eye contact felt like the first true tell, her librarian's instinct for spotting plagiarized book reports. We're not signing anything without understanding it. Harold's hands shook slightly as he picked up the top page. Not fear, Margaret realized. Anger. Bradley's jaw tightened. Dad, you're making this harder than it needs to be. The county records show nothing. Without a valid deed, you're vulnerable. Anyone could claim. The county vault keeps physical records going back decades. Harold set the paper down carefully. I know this. I've paid property taxes for 40 years, which we appreciate. Bradley's voice shifted, lost its warmth. But you're not understanding the legal complications here. Trust me on this. I did trust you. Harold's words hung in the air like smoke. 15 years ago, when you suggested the family trust, when you said it would protect us. Bradley gathered his papers with sharp movements. You're making a terrible mistake. When the county comes after this property because there's no valid claim, then we'll handle it. Margaret surprised herself by speaking. Together. Without signing papers, we don't understand. Bradley stood, and for a moment he looked like the boy who'd cried when his hamster died, the teenager who'd asked permission before every date. Then his face hardened into something else entirely. Don't say I didn't warn you. The door closed behind him with careful precision. Through the window, Margaret watched his Mercedes disappear down the street. Harold sank onto the couch, suddenly looking every one of his 78 years. That evening, hammered deep into the grass, Harold cut every Saturday. A for sale sign appeared on their lawn like a wound. Margaret found Patricia's message Tuesday morning while making coffee. Coming by at 10. We need to talk. Don't worry, Mom. Don't worry. As if worry were optional, as if the for sale sign Harold had pulled from their lawn the night before hadn't sent his blood sugars spiking to dangerous levels. Patricia arrived precisely at 10 with her husband Doug trailing behind. His smile too wide, his handshake too firm when Harold answered the door. Doug sold mortgages, had been selling them for 20 years through markets good and bad, always seeming to survive by methods Margaret didn't want to examine too closely. The house needs immediate repairs. Patricia settled on the couch, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. The foundation, the roof, the electrical system, you can't afford it on your fixed income. Harold sat in his recliner, the one with the worn armrest where his hand had rested through decades of evening news. What repairs? Everything works fine. That's what you think. Doug pulled papers from his briefcase with practiced ease. I had my inspector friend drive by. $30,000 in foundation work alone. $50,000 if you want the roof done right. You had someone inspect our house without asking us. Margaret's voice came out sharper than intended. We're trying to help. Patricia's eyes filled with tears so quickly, Margaret wondered if she'd practiced. You're too proud to admit you need assistance. That's always been your problem. Show us the inspection report. Harold's accountant voice, the one that had questioned discrepancies in corporate tax returns for 40 years. Doug smiled wider. I can get you copies. But the real solution is here. Reverse mortgage applications, already filled out. My company specializes in helping seniors access their equity. Margaret noticed him photographing their china cabinet with his phone, lingering on the antique clock Harold's father had left them. Cataloging, she realized. Appraising. We don't want a reverse mortgage. Harold stood, and Margaret saw the tremor in his hands again. We want to see these repair estimates before discussing anything. Dad, don't be stubborn. Patricia's tears fell freely now. We're your children. Don't you trust us? The question landed like a stone in still water. Margaret watched ripples of guilt cross Harold's face. The good father's instinct to trust, to support, to believe the best. Of course we trust you. Margaret spoke carefully, feeling her way through dangerous terrain. Which is why we'd like time to review everything properly, to understand. Doug's smile finally faded. Time is what you don't have. These repairs, if they're not addressed, we'll call you. Harold moved toward the door, polite but unmistakable. After we've reviewed the documentation. After they left, Margaret found Doug's business card wedged in their mail slot. On the back, in red ink, final notice. We never received a first notice, she said quietly. Harold was already at his desk, pulling out the accordion folder where they'd kept important documents for decades. Tax returns, mortgage statements, insurance policies. The deed copy, that had always been in the front section, was gone. Margaret's hand found Harold's shoulder. Through the window, she could see their neighbor Jim Collins mowing his lawn, Mrs. Henderson walking her dog, the ordinary Tuesday afternoon rhythms of a street where they'd lived for 40 years. We need help, she said. Harold nodded, his jaw tight. But who can we trust? That evening, Harold called Tommy in Seattle. 7 times, leaving increasingly worried messages. Their youngest son, the quiet one who'd moved across the country to work in tech, never called back. At midnight, Margaret double-checked every lock before bed, then stood at their bedroom window looking at the empty lawn where the for sale sign had been, wondering if Bradley would simply hammer in another. Wondering how the deed they'd filed 4 decades ago could vanish like smoke, like trust itself. Wednesday afternoon arrived with the persistent autumn rain that made Margaret's joints ache. She was sorting Harold's medications when the doorbell rang. 3 sharp raps that felt like a summons. Bradley stood on their porch with a young woman carrying a leather briefcase. This is Rosa Gutierrez. She's here to notarize some routine paperwork. Rosa extended her hand, her grip warm and professional. Mr. and Mrs. Winters, I just need to verify your identities and witness your signatures. Margaret noticed things immediately. The way Rosa's eyes moved from Bradley to the medication bottles on the counter. How her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when Bradley spoke. The careful way she set her notary stamp on the table without opening it. The documents Bradley spread across their dining table were dense with legal language. Quitclaim deed, irrevocable trust transfer, beneficiary designation changes, words that swam together like alphabet soup. Just here and here, Bradley pointed with a gold pen that caught the overhead light. Rosa will witness, and we can move forward with protecting your assets. Harold picked up the first page, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. What exactly am I signing away? Nothing. It's just updating the trust structure. Bradley's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stepped into their kitchen. Give me 1 second. Read through everything. In the sudden quiet, Rosa leaned forward. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Have you had independent legal review of these documents? Margaret's breath caught. Bradley said it was routine. Mrs. Winters. Rosa's dark eyes were steady, kind. I notice your husband's diabetes medication. Some of those can affect cognition temporarily. Have you discussed these papers with anyone outside the family? We don't know who to trust. The words escaped before Margaret could stop them. Rosa's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, frowned at the screen, then stood abruptly. Her pen rolled off the table, bouncing twice before sliding under Margaret's chair. Excuse me. Rosa bent to retrieve it, her body blocking Bradley's view from the kitchen. When she straightened, a business card sat hidden beneath Margaret's teacup. Her lips shaped words without sound. Call me later. Bradley returned, pocketing his phone. All set? Let's get this done. Rosa gathered her materials with deliberate slowness. Actually, Mr. Winters, these documents require additional witnesses for this type of property transfer. And I'll need to see both your current driver's licenses. The photos need to be clear and match exactly. You can see their licenses. Bradley's voice had edges now. With proper lighting and without glare, per notary requirements. Rosa's professional smile never wavered. I also need to verify the grantor's understanding independently. That's going to take more time than we have this afternoon. Notary law is very specific about how long. I'll need to schedule a proper appointment, Friday at the earliest. Rosa packed her briefcase with careful precision. I'll call to confirm. Bradley's jaw worked. This is routine paperwork. Then Friday won't be a problem. Rosa extended her hand to Margaret. Thank you for your patience, Mrs. Winters. After they left, Margaret lifted her teacup with shaking hands. The business card underneath was cream-colored, professional. On the back, in neat handwriting, don't sign anything. I can help. She knows something. Margaret showed Harold the card. Or she's part of it. But Harold's voice lacked conviction. Did you see how she looked at your medication? How she asked about independent review? Margaret pressed the card between her palms. Bradley didn't hire her. He needed a notary and found someone who actually follows the rules. That evening, after Harold had checked the locks twice and set their ancient alarm system, Margaret stood in their bedroom holding Rosa's card. Through the window, she could see the Hendersons' porch light, the Collins recycling bins at the curb, the ordinary Wednesday evening of a street where nothing terrible was supposed to happen. She picked up her phone and dialed. Rosa answered on the first ring. Mrs. Winters, I was hoping you'd call. Rosa arrived Thursday morning at 7, before the sun had fully burned off the October fog. She carried a laptop and a box of donuts that smelled like Margaret's childhood. Sugar and cinnamon and something safe. Harold doesn't trust you yet. Margaret held the door open anyway. He thinks you might be working with Bradley. Smart man. Rosa set the donuts on their kitchen counter. My grandmother lost her house 5 years ago. Same scheme. Someone claiming the deed was invalid, pressuring her to sign over the property to protect it. By the time we understood what was happening, she was in foreclosure. Harold appeared in his bathrobe, his white hair standing at odd angles. You could be lying. I could be. Rosa opened her laptop. But I'm going to show you something, and then you can decide. Do you have internet? 20 minutes later, they sat around the kitchen table staring at a screen that rewrote their understanding of everything. The county clerk's online database, accessible to anyone with basic information, displayed their property records going back 42 years. There, Rosa pointed to a line highlighted in green. Your deed, filed March 15th, 1983. Properly recorded, properly indexed, perfectly valid. Margaret's finger traced the screen, not quite touching. It's there. It's really there. But look at this. Rosa scrolled down. 3 weeks ago, a lien was filed against your property. $400,000, filed by BW Development LLC. Know who that is? Harold's hands had stopped shaking. Bradley Winters Development. He's using his position as family trust manager to claim authority over your assets. Rosa pulled up a second screen. This is fraud. Financial elder abuse, and it's prosecutable. Why would he do this? Margaret's voice cracked. We raised him. We paid for his college, helped with his first business loan. Rosa reached across the table, her young hand covering Margaret's age-spotted one. I don't know why people do this to their parents. I just know they do, and someone needs to stop them. Harold stood abruptly, moving to the window. You could be gathering evidence for Bradley. You could be building a case that we're paranoid, incompetent. I could be. Rosa closed her laptop. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach you how to access these records yourself. I'm going to show you how to print evidence. Then, I'm going to leave my business card, and you can call me if you want help. Or not. She spent the next hour teaching them like students, patiently, repeatedly, checking their understanding. Harold learned to navigate the county website on his own tablet. Margaret practiced printing documents. Rosa showed them how to save PDFs with dated timestamps. "Why are you doing this?" Margaret finally asked. Rosa was quiet for a moment, her hand still on the keyboard. "My abuela died 6 months after losing her house. Just gave up. I watched my mother clean out the apartment that should have still been home." She looked up, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I can't save my grandmother, but maybe I can save you." Harold cleared his throat roughly. "The locks. Bradley has a key to the old ones. I know a locksmith. Good guy, reasonable prices, and I'm going to leave you with something else." Rosa pulled a small camera from her bag. "Basic security. Uploads to the cloud. No one can erase what it records." That afternoon, while a locksmith changed their deadbolts and Rosa showed Harold how to monitor the camera from his phone, Margaret made coffee in her kitchen in her house, with a deed filed properly in 1983 that the county vault had remembered when her own son had tried to make it disappear. Rosa stayed until 6, showing them how to document everything: photographs, written timelines, saved voicemails. When she finally left, she promised to return each morning before work. "Just until you feel safe," she said. Margaret watched through the window as Rosa's car disappeared down the street. "I think we might survive this." Harold's hand found hers, and together they stood in the kitchen where they'd fed 3 children breakfast for decades, where the deed to their home had never vanished at all. It had only been waiting, patient and true, in a county vault that remembered everything. Friday morning arrived quiet, almost peaceful. Margaret made coffee while Harold checked the security camera feed on his tablet, a skill Rosa had taught him just yesterday that now felt essential as breathing. "Nothing overnight," he reported, his fingers scrolling through time-stamped images of their empty porch, their quiet street, the normalcy that no longer felt normal. Rosa arrived at 8 with a bag of bagels and news. "I'm going to monitor remotely this weekend. The camera sends alerts to my phone. If anything happens, call 911 first, then me." Saturday brought Bradley. The Mercedes appeared at 10:30, and this time he wasn't alone. A white van pulled up behind him, and a man in a locksmith's uniform climbed out carrying a toolbox. Harold stood at their new front door, his hand steady on the deadbolt Rosa's guy had installed. Through the window, he watched Bradley gesture at the house like he owned it. The doorbell rang, then pounding. "Mom, Dad, open the door." Margaret's phone buzzed. Rosa's text: "Recording everything, don't engage." Bradley's voice rose, carrying through the door. "You're not thinking clearly. This paranoia about your own children, it's textbook mental decline." "We're calling the police," Harold said through the door. "You're trespassing." "Trespassing? This is family property." "No." Harold's voice projected calm authority. "It's our property, properly deeded. You filed a fraudulent lien against it." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Then Bradley's voice changed, shed its veneer. "You're making a terrible mistake. When the court sees this..." Margaret dialed 911, her hand steady. Yes. My son is trying to force entry with a locksmith. We have a valid deed and new locks. Through the window, she watched Bradley's face transform. Shock, calculation, rage. He grabbed the locksmith's arm. The van pulled away quickly. Sunday was Patricia. She arrived at noon with Dr. Morse, the psychiatrist friend, who carried himself with careful medical authority. Just a wellness check, Patricia called through the door. Dr. Morse wants to ask a few questions. Rosa's text came immediately. Impromptu evals, not legal. Need court order. Harold opened the door 2 inches, the chain holding. Do you have a court order? Dr. Morse stepped forward, patronizing. This isn't adversarial. Your children are concerned. No, Margaret said. We'll speak with our own physicians. Mom, please. Patricia's tears fell. This paranoia, these accusations. The fraudulent lien is documented, Harold said. County records prove it. Margaret called 911 again. Officer Janet Mills arrived and reviewed the situation with professional efficiency. Do you have authorization? Mills asked Dr. Morse. This was informal. Then leave. Mills turned to the Winters. 3rd time this weekend. Next time, file harassment charges. Sunday evening, Tommy finally called. His voice sounded hollow. Bradley says you're not well, that you need help. Margaret closed her eyes. Tommy, he filed a fraudulent lien. County records prove it. Silence stretched across 3,000 miles. He's been handling everything, Tommy whispered. He said he was helping. He's stealing from us. Harold took the phone. We can send you documents. More silence. I need to think. The call ended. Monday morning, Rosa arrived with Marcus Chen. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a handshake that conveyed competence. Marcus sat at their kitchen table and listened to everything. The deed never vanished, he said finally. Your son is committing fraud. We're going to stop him. Marcus Chen spent Monday morning at the Winters' kitchen table, transforming their dining space into a war room. His laptop sat open beside stacks of documents Margaret had organized with her librarian's precision. 40 years of mortgage statements, property tax receipts, home improvement invoices. Tell me everything, Marcus said, his pen poised over a yellow legal pad. Start from when Bradley first mentioned the family trust. Harold's memory for numbers proved invaluable. He recalled exact dates, precise amounts, the specific language Bradley had used 15 years ago when suggesting the trust arrangement. Margaret filled in the emotional details Marcus needed. Bradley's increasing distance, Patricia's growing financial desperation, Tommy's careful avoidance of family gatherings. I need to introduce you to someone, Rosa said Tuesday afternoon, arriving with a young woman whose sharp eyes cataloged everything in the room. This is Sandra Lopez. She's a paralegal at the courthouse. Sandra shook their hands with professional warmth. I spend my lunch breaks photographing documents for cases like yours. The county keeps physical records going back decades. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through images. I found something interesting. Bradley's filed similar liens against 3 other elderly homeowners in the past 2 years. Margaret felt the air leave the room. 3 others? All living alone, all with paid-off homes, all facing sudden family emergencies, requiring immediate property transfers. Sandra's voice carried quiet fury. The pattern is unmistakable once you know what to look for. Wednesday morning, Rosa taught Harold to scan documents using his phone, a simple app that captured images and converted them to PDFs with timestamps. Margaret watched her husband of 56 years master technology he'd resisted for years, his accountant's brain adapting quickly once he understood its necessity. Make copies of everything, Marcus instructed. Digital and physical. Store them in multiple locations. With neighbors you trust, with Rosa, with me. Bradley can't steal what he can't find. That afternoon, Harold distributed manila folders to Jim Collins next door, to the Hendersons across the street, to Eugene Washington 3 houses down. Each folder contained copies of the fraudulent lien, the valid deed, Marcus's contact information. Wednesday afternoon brought Bradley. He arrived with 2 men in expensive suits, their presence designed to intimidate. Through the security camera, Margaret watched them approach. Predators assessing prey. The doorbell became pounding. Open this door. We have legal authority. Harold stood in their entryway, his phone recording video. You have no authority. Leave our property. You're too old to fight this, Bradley shouted, his voice carrying through the door and into Rosa's cloud-stored recording. You don't understand what you're up against. Margaret dialed 911 on speaker, her voice steady. My son and 2 associates are trespassing and making threats. The men retreated when police sirens approached. That evening, Tommy finally called back. His voice shook across the distance. Bradley said you have dementia, that you need immediate institutionalization. He showed me doctor's reports. Forged, Harold interrupted. Tommy, your brother is committing fraud. He's trying to steal our home. Silence stretched. Then Tommy's voice, barely audible. He said he was protecting you, that I needed to help convince you to accept care. We're protecting ourselves, Margaret said gently. With an attorney, with evidence, with the truth. You can help us or stay silent. But the silence makes you complicit. The call ended without resolution. But Margaret heard something in Tommy's goodbye. Doubt creeping into certainty. Conscience stirring after years of sleep. Thursday morning at the senior center, Margaret found an unexpected army assembling. Eugene Washington stood at the front of the community room, his distinguished presence commanding attention from 24 elderly neighbors. A retired bank manager with silver hair and sharp eyes, he'd spent 40 years protecting customers from predatory schemes. The Winters aren't alone, Eugene told the gathering. Financial elder abuse is systematic, organized, and it stops when communities refuse to look away. He explained reverse mortgages, fraudulent liens, guardianship abuse, translating banking complexity into terms everyone understood. Margaret watched neighbors she'd known for decades lean forward, recognizing pieces of their own family's pressures in Eugene's examples. By noon, Margaret had organized a phone tree. 15 neighbors committed to daily check-ins, to witnessing documents, to being present if Bradley returned. Friday, Sandra called, with news from the courthouse. Bradley's LLC has no legitimate business license. The company exists only on paper, a shell he created to file fraudulent claims. Harold added this to their growing evidence file, his accountant's training making him meticulous about documentation. Each piece of paper was dated, sourced, cross-referenced. Saturday morning shattered their careful preparation. Dr. Morse arrived again, this time with Patricia and official-looking psychiatric evaluation forms. Through the window, Margaret saw her daughter's tear-stained face, her trembling hands clutching papers like lifelines. Please, Mom, this is for your own good. But Margaret had spent Wednesday morning at her doctor's office. She'd obtained cognitive clearance letters, current medical records, documented proof of mental competency from physicians she'd seen for 20 years. When Dr. Morse insisted on entering, Harold opened the door 2 inches, security chain holding. Do you have court authorization for psychiatric evaluation? Your daughter requested, not sufficient. Jim Collins appeared on their porch, his retired police officer's authority unmistakable. His phone recorded everything. You need a court order, Dr. Morse's professional veneer cracked. "This is a wellness check. This is harassment," Jim said flatly. "Leave, or I'm calling it in." Patricia's tears became sobs. "You're destroying our family. Bradley's just trying to help, and you're making him the villain. Can't you see how paranoid you've become?" Margaret's heart broke watching her daughter believe the lies. But she couldn't save Patricia from choices Patricia kept making. "We love you," Margaret said through the door. "But we won't sign away our home to prove it." After they left, Harold sank onto the couch. "We raised them better than this." "We raised them," Margaret corrected gently. "They chose who to become." That evening, Eugene Washington appeared at their door with his wife Claire, bringing dinner in solidarity. Jim Collins joined them with documentation of every confrontation. Rosa arrived with Marcus, reviewing their legal strategy. Their kitchen filled with chosen family, people bound not by blood, but by conscience, by the simple radical act of believing elderly people deserve dignity and protection. "Monday, we go on offense," Marcus announced. "I'm filing an emergency petition to freeze any property transfers and requesting a full investigation into Bradley's business practices." Margaret looked around her kitchen table at these unexpected allies and felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope, solid as the foundation Harold had maintained for 40 years. Sunday's video call started civil and ended in warfare. Margaret had set up her tablet carefully, Harold beside her on the couch. Bradley's face filled the screen from his home office, Patricia joining from her kitchen, Tommy's connection flickering from Seattle. "We need to discuss your situation rationally," Bradley began, his real estate developer's charm deployed like armor. "We know about the fraudulent lien," Harold said flatly. The silence that followed felt like falling. Bradley's face transformed, shock, then calculation, then cold fury. "That lien protects my interests as trust manager. The house has always been family property. The deed is properly filed, has been since 1983. The county records prove it." Margaret's voice stayed steady despite her racing heart. "You filed a false claim against our home." Patricia's tears started immediately. "Mom, you're not understanding. Bradley's trying to help. These paranoid delusions—" "We have an attorney," Harold interrupted. "Marcus Chen. He specializes in elder financial abuse." Bradley's laugh was sharp, dangerous. "You've hired someone? With what money? Your Social Security? This is exactly why we need guardianship proceedings. You're making decisions that prove you're mentally incompetent." Tommy's screen went dark, disconnected without a word. Monday morning, Margaret discovered their bank accounts locked. She'd gone online to pay the electric bill and found error messages, frozen access, security holds she hadn't requested. Rosa arrived within an hour of Margaret's call, bringing Marcus. Together they discovered Bradley was listed as beneficiary on accounts the Winters had opened decades ago and forgotten. Old Christmas Club savings, a credit union membership from Harold's first job. "He's using his trust manager position to claim authority," Marcus explained, "already on his phone with the bank's fraud department. We'll freeze everything, open new accounts he can't touch." By noon, their finances were secured in a new bank. By evening, Margaret had documented every attempted unauthorized access. Tuesday afternoon brought the process server. The man in the cheap suit looked apologetic as he handed Margaret the envelope. Inside, official court documents declared Bradley's petition for emergency guardianship based on his parents' demonstrated mental incompetence and inability to manage their affairs. Margaret read the allegations. Paranoid delusions about family members, inability to understand financial documents, making irrational decisions against professional advice, refusing necessary medical care. Every interaction twisted, every boundary they'd set weaponized as evidence of decline. He's building a narrative, Marcus said that evening, reviewing the petition. Every time you refuse to sign his documents, every time you call the police, he's framing it as proof you're incompetent. So we prove otherwise. Harold's jaw was set with veteran's determination. We document everything. Our clarity, our competence, our reasons. Marcus nodded. We start tonight. Video testimonials from both of you, explaining clearly why you've refused Bradley's demands, medical records from your doctors, cognitive assessments. That evening, Harold and Margaret sat in their living room and recorded the truth. Margaret spoke about noticing Bradley's evasions, his refusal to provide documentation, the fraudulent liens she'd discovered. Harold explained his 40 years as an accountant, his understanding of the documents Bradley wanted them to sign, his recognition of fraud. Meanwhile, Sandra called with news from the courthouse. Dr. Morse lost his medical license in Nevada 3 years ago. Insurance fraud. He's not licensed to practice in this state at all. Wednesday morning, Marcus filed counter motions and Sandra photographed evidence. The Winters home had become a fortress of documentation, every conversation recorded, every visitor logged, every threat preserved as evidence. They were building a case. But Bradley was building faster. Wednesday morning, Marcus arrived with printouts that transformed their understanding of everything. Doug Morrison, Patricia's husband, receives finder's fees from Bradley's development company. $15,000 for every elderly homeowner he refers who signs a reverse mortgage. Marcus spread documents across their kitchen table. He's not just corrupt. He's part of an organized scheme. Margaret felt sick. Patricia's desperation suddenly made terrible sense. Doug had been controlling her through debt, and Bradley had been exploiting that control. Thursday brought Patricia for what she claimed was a quick visit. She seemed agitated, her hands shaking as she accepted Margaret's offer of tea. While Patricia used the bathroom, her purse tipped over. Harold saw the deed, their missing original copy from 20 years ago, peeking from the leather bag. His accountant's hands moved quickly, photographing it with his phone before carefully replacing everything. After Patricia left, they stared at the evidence. Their daughter had stolen their deed, probably to prevent them from having proof when Bradley claimed it had vanished. "She knows," Margaret whispered. "She's known all along what Bradley was doing." Rosa arrived that afternoon with new technology, encrypted messaging apps, secure file sharing, ways to communicate that Bradley couldn't intercept. She taught them patiently, her tech-savvy expertise making complex security simple. "Your phone conversations aren't safe," Rosa explained. "Bradley has connections. We assume he's monitoring everything he can access." Friday morning, Tommy called Margaret's new encrypted number. Rosa must have sent it to him. "Mom," his voice cracked. "I need to tell you something." The confession poured out. Bradley had been pressuring him for months, promising that selling the house would pay off Tommy's student loans. Bradley had framed it as helping their parents transition to better care while securing their children's financial futures. "I knew it felt wrong," Tommy said, "but I owe $80,000. I couldn't see past my own debt. And Bradley kept saying you were declining, that you needed help you were too proud to accept." "Tommy, we're not declining. We're being robbed." Silence, then, I know that now. I've been complicit through silence. I'm so sorry." "Can you help us?" Margaret asked gently. "Do you have evidence? Emails, texts, anything showing Bradley's planning?" "Everything. 3 years of messages. I saved it all because some part of me knew I'd need proof that I tried to say no." That afternoon, an elderly couple appeared at their door. The Hendersons, from across town, had heard about the Winters fight through Eugene Washington's network. "Bradley targeted us 2 years ago. Mrs. Henderson said quietly. Different approach. Our daughter's medical bills. He convinced us to take a reverse mortgage through Doug Morrison, then filed a lien when we couldn't make payments. We lost the house. We were too frightened to fight, Mr. Henderson added. Too ashamed. But if our testimony helped stop him from doing this to others, Marcus arrived to interview them, documenting another pattern in Bradley's scheme. Sandra was already at the courthouse, pulling records that showed the Hendersons' property had been sold through Bradley's LLC at below market value, then flipped for massive profit. By Friday evening, the scope of Bradley's operation was clear. 12 victims over 5 years, millions in stolen equity, a predatory system targeting the elderly and vulnerable. The Winters sat at their kitchen table surrounded by evidence, their chosen family working late into the night, Rosa organizing documents, Marcus drafting legal motions, Sandra cross-referencing courthouse records, Eugene calling other potential victims. We're not just fighting for our home anymore, Harold said quietly. We're exposing something bigger. Margaret looked around at these people who'd become family through conscience rather than blood. Then we'd better win. Saturday morning arrived with silence, the oppressive kind that signals something fundamentally wrong. Margaret woke to darkness. The bedside clock was dead, its digital display blank. She reached for the lamp. Nothing. Harold? Her voice cut through the quiet. The power's out. But as dawn light filtered through their curtains, they saw the neighbors' houses glowing with normal morning life. Porch lights, kitchen windows bright with breakfast routines. Only their home sat dark and cold. Harold checked the breaker box while Margaret called the utility company. The customer service representative's voice turned careful when she pulled up their account. Ma'am, our records show authorization from the account manager to disconnect service. A Mr. Bradley Winters? He's not authorized, Margaret said, her librarian's voice sharp with precision. This is our account, our home. Rosa arrived within the hour, bringing her electrician cousin Miguel. While Marcus filed emergency motions downtown, Miguel checked for illegal tampering, cut lines, damaged equipment, anything that would give them criminal charges to file. Everything's intact, Miguel reported. The utility company shut you off based on fraudulent authorization. They'll reconnect, but it takes time. Sunday brought Patricia. The moving truck appeared at noon, a massive vehicle blocking their quiet street. Patricia emerged from a following car with 2 men in work uniforms, her face set with grim determination. Mom, Dad, please don't make this harder. Her voice carried across the lawn. The court authorized this, but Margaret was already on the phone with 911, while through the window she watched their neighbors emerge. Jim Collins first, then the Hendersons, then Eugene Washington with his wife Claire. More followed. 15, then 20 people forming a human chain across the Winters walkway. No one's moving anything, Eugene announced, his retired bank manager's authority unmistakable. Not without legitimate court documents. Officer Janet Mills arrived, the same officer who'd responded to previous calls. She reviewed Patricia's paperwork with professional thoroughness, then shook her head. These are petition documents, not court orders. You have no authority to remove property. Patricia's composure cracked. They're my parents. They need help. They're too confused to accept. They seem perfectly clear to me, Mills said flatly. The movers need to leave. Now. After they departed, Margaret found Patricia sitting in her car, crying so hard her whole body shook. For a moment, Margaret's mother's heart overwhelmed everything else. But when she approached, Patricia looked up with such genuine confusion that Margaret understood. Her daughter truly believed the lies she'd been told. Monday morning brought the competency hearing. The courtroom felt sterile, official, designed to intimidate. Bradley sat with an attorney whose suit probably cost more than the Winters' monthly expenses, radiating expensive confidence. Harold and Margaret testified clearly, answering every question about their finances, their home, their decisions. Marcus presented medical records, cognitive assessments, video testimonials. Eugene and Jim testified about the Winters' mental clarity and community involvement. But Bradley's attorney was good. He painted every boundary they'd set as paranoia, every refusal to sign as confusion, every call to police as evidence of decline. He made their resistance sound like delusion. Judge Morrison listened carefully, her expression unreadable. When the testimony concluded, she looked at the Winters with something that might have been sympathy. "I'm granting a continuance, 2 weeks. But, Mr. and Mrs. Winters, you need more than character witnesses. You need concrete proof of fraud, not just competence." That evening, Margaret sat in their still dark house. Miguel had brought industrial lights powered by generators and wondered how much proof would be enough. Then Tommy called. "Mom, I'm flying in tomorrow morning. I have everything you need." "I should have done this months ago." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry. But I'm ready now. I'm ready to make this right." Tuesday morning, Tommy arrived carrying a cardboard box that held 3 years of evidence and shame. Margaret opened the door to find her youngest son thinner than she remembered, his software engineer's pallor suggesting too many nights of conscience fighting sleep. Harold stood behind her, silent, waiting. "I should have done this months ago." Tommy's voice cracked as he set the box on their kitchen table. "I've been complicit through cowardice. I'm so sorry." The box contained printouts of emails, screenshots of text messages, recorded phone calls, a complete digital trail of Bradley and Patricia planning to liquidate their parents' assets. Tommy had saved everything, his programmer's instinct for documentation warring with his desire to avoid conflict. "Bradley started 3 years ago," Tommy explained, his hands shaking as he sorted documents, "right after his development company nearly failed. He convinced Patricia that helping him would solve both their problems, his business debt, her medical bills." Margaret read an email dated 2 years back. Bradley to Patricia, "They're too old to manage the property anyway. We're just accelerating the inevitable. Think of it as early inheritance." Harold's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet, letting Tommy continue his confession. "He told me you were declining. Showed me forged doctor's reports. Said you needed institutionalization but were too proud to accept help." Tommy looked up, tears streaming. "I wanted to believe him because the alternative meant my brother was a monster. And he promised if I stayed quiet, he'd pay off my student loans from the house sale." "You chose debt relief over truth," Harold said flatly. "Yes." Tommy didn't flinch from the judgment. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making amends. But first, there's more. Bradley did this to Patricia's in-laws too, the Mitchells. He forced them into a nursing home last year, sold their property through his LLC, pocketed the profit." Marcus arrived within the hour, Rosa and Sandra following. They spread Tommy's evidence across every available surface, cross-referencing with Sandra's courthouse findings. Wednesday morning brought a gathering that transformed their kitchen into a coalition war room. The Mitchells sat beside the Hendersons, 2 more elderly couples whose homes Bradley had targeted, and Margaret watched her private nightmare become a public reckoning. 12 victims over 5 years, Sandra reported, her paralegal's precision turning scattered crimes into prosecutable pattern. $4 million in stolen equity, all using the same methods: fraudulent liens, forged documents, exploitation of trust relationships. Marcus was already on the phone with the county prosecutor. This isn't civil anymore. This is criminal elder abuse on a systemic scale. That afternoon, Bradley arrived with an eviction notice. He hammered on their door, shouting about their 48-hour deadline to vacate based on his fraudulent lien. Harold opened the door. His hands, which had shaken through weeks of stress, were steady now. "We'll see you in court," Harold said quietly. "You're delusional, old fools. All of us will." Margaret stepped beside her husband. Behind them, Tommy stood in the hallway, his presence a silent testimony. Through the window, Bradley would see the other victims gathered at the kitchen table. The attorney reviewing evidence, the paralegal organizing documentation. Bradley's face drained of color as he finally understood. He wasn't facing two frightened elderly people anymore. He was facing a coalition armed with evidence, legal representation, and the truth that refused to stay buried. 48 hours, he repeated, but his voice had lost its certainty. After he left, Margaret looked at her kitchen filled with chosen family and one redeemed son, and felt something shift. They weren't just defending their home anymore. They were changing the system that had failed all of them. Thursday dissolved into a marathon of preparation that carried through the night into Friday's dawn. Marcus orchestrated while Rosa, Sandra, Tommy, and the Winters organized 3 years of fraud into courtroom narrative. Eugene Washington arrived at midnight with 17 neighbors willing to testify. The Hendersons brought their adult children. The Mitchells came with medical records proving their forced institutionalization. "Sleep is optional," Marcus said at 3 a.m., his idealism burning bright despite exhaustion. "Justice isn't." Margaret made coffee while Harold checked and rechecked his binder of 40 years of payment stubs. Every canceled check, every tax receipt, every insurance payment. His accountant's precision creating an irrefutable timeline of ownership. Friday morning, the courthouse steps filled with supporters. Local news cameras captured elderly victims walking together, neighbors standing witness, a community refusing to let predators operate in silence. Inside, Judge Morrison's courtroom felt heavy with consequence. Bradley sat with his expensive attorney, projecting confidence. But Margaret saw the cracks. His too bright smile, his restless hands, the way his eyes avoided his parents entirely. Marcus presented first. He walked the judge through Bradley's pattern. 12 victims, identical methods, millions stolen. Sandra's courthouse photographs appeared on screens. Each document another piece of systematic abuse. Then Harold testified. He stood with veterans' posture and spoke with accountants' precision about buying their home with VA benefits in 1983. About 40 years of payments. About a son who'd volunteered to manage a family trust and then weaponized that trust into theft. Bradley's attorney attacked, painting Harold as confused, Margaret as paranoid. But Harold's clarity was undeniable. His dates were exact, his financial understanding complete. Then came the critical moment Rosa had orchestrated. "Mr. Winters," Marcus said, "please tell the court about your property deed." Harold produced a document, its county seal gleaming under courtroom lights. "This is the original deed from 1983, retrieved from the county vault's physical archives. Properly filed, properly recorded, never vanished." Margaret watched the judge's expression harden as she examined the deed. Stamped, dated, undeniably valid. "The county vault remembered," Harold said quietly. "What my son tried to make us forget." Margaret followed, spreading 40 years of canceled checks across the evidence table. Mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance premiums. Every obligation met, every promise kept. "We're not confused," she told the judge. "We're not declining. We're being systematically robbed by our own children, and we're not the only victims." The other elderly couples testified, each story echoing the same predatory pattern. Eugene Washington explained the financial mechanisms. Tommy provided emails showing premeditation. Sandra presented courthouse records proving Bradley's LLC existed solely for fraud. By noon, Bradley's attorney had stopped objecting. By 2 p.m., his confidence had evaporated entirely. Judge Morrison didn't need the full afternoon to decide. Her voice carried steel when she spoke. "This court voids the fraudulent lien filed by BW Chao Development LLC. I'm referring Bradley Winters for criminal prosecution, issuing immediate restraining orders, and ordering damages paid to all identified victims." She looked directly at Harold and Margaret. "Your courage and clear thinking in the face of family betrayal is commendable. The county vault remembered, and now this court will ensure justice remembers too." The afternoon session began with Patricia on the witness stand, her mascara running in dark streams down her face. "I didn't know how deep we were." Her voice cracked. "Doug's debts. The medical bills from when Emma was sick. He said if we helped Bradley just this once, we'd be free. He made it sound like we were protecting them, not stealing from them." Marcus's voice was gentle but unrelenting. Patricia's shoulders shook. "Bradley said you were declining anyway. That we were just accelerating the inevitable. I wanted to believe him because the alternative meant my brother was a monster." Judge Morrison leaned forward. "Did Mr. Har Winters threaten you or your husband?" "Yes." Patricia's whisper carried through the silent courtroom. "He said if we didn't help, he'd expose Doug's mortgage fraud schemes. We'd lose everything: our house, Doug's license, maybe custody of Emma." Margaret watched her daughter crumble and felt her mother's heart breaking, even as her survivor's fury burned. Patricia had chosen fear over courage, debt relief over integrity. But she'd also been manipulated by men who'd seen her desperation as opportunity. Tommy testified next, his programmer's precision creating an undeniable digital trail. Emails planning the scheme dated back 3 years, text messages coordinating pressure tactics, recorded phone calls where Bradley laughed about handling the old folks. "Why did you save everything?" Marcus asked. Tommy's voice was steady despite tears streaming down his face. "Because some part of me knew I'd need proof. That someday, my conscience would matter more than my cowardice." The other victims testified. The Hendersons, the Mitchells, 2 more elderly couples Bradley had targeted. Each story echoed the same predatory pattern: fraudulent liens, pressure tactics, exploitation of family trust. When Bradley's attorney attempted one final claim of incompetence, Sandra stood with devastating evidence. Dr. Morse refused to appear today. He's aware testifying could lead to perjury charges, given he lost his medical license in Nevada for insurance fraud 3 years ago. Judge Morrison's expression hardened to granite. "I've heard enough." Her ruling came swift and comprehensive. The fraudulent lien was voided. Restraining orders issued against Bradley and Doug. Criminal referrals filed with the district attorney. Damages ordered paid to all victims from Bradley's business assets. Mr. and Mrs. Winters demonstrated remarkable clarity and courage in protecting themselves from systematic financial abuse. The judge looked directly at them. "Your children's claims of incompetence are not only false, they're cruel projection of their own moral failures." Court officers approached Bradley's table. Harold watched his eldest son's face transform through shock, denial, rage, and finally, something that might have been shame. Bradley Winters, you're under arrest for elder financial abuse, fraud, and filing false documents. The handcuffs clicked shut with finality. Margaret found Harold's hand, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease, born of 56 years together. Through the courtroom windows, October afternoon light caught the tears she finally let fall. Not from fear or defeat, but from the profound relief of being believed. Saturday morning arrived quiet and clean, without the weight of dread that had pressed on them for weeks. Margaret woke to find Harold already dressed, standing at their bedroom window watching the street where nothing terrible was happening. No Mercedes arriving with threats, no moving trucks. Just Mrs. Henderson walking her dog and Jim Collins retrieving his newspaper. "We're safe," Harold said, as if testing the words for truth. Margaret joined him at the window. "We're safe." Sunday brought Patricia. She arrived alone, Doug's absence speaking volumes. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands empty of briefcases or papers, carrying only her shame and a tentative hope for forgiveness. "I filed for divorce yesterday," Patricia said from their porch, not presuming entry. "And I'm starting therapy Tuesday. I know those things don't fix what I did. I know I betrayed you when you needed me most." Margaret studied her daughter, really looked at her for the first time in months. Saw the woman who'd lost her way, who'd let fear drive her into cruelty, who was now trying to find her way back. "We're not ready to trust you yet," Margaret said carefully. "But we're willing to start family counseling, if you're serious about making amends." Patricia's tears fell freely. "I am. I swear I am." Harold appeared beside Margaret, his hand finding hers. "Actions matter more than promises now." "I understand." Patricia turned to leave, then stopped. "I love you both. I never stopped, even when I forgot how to show it." Monday brought unexpected consequences of Friday's courtroom victory. Local news coverage led 3 more elderly victims to contact Marcus's office. The district attorney confirmed Bradley would face multiple felony charges, with trial likely in 6 months. Tuesday afternoon, Tommy arrived with a U-Haul and news. "I took a job here, tech startup downtown. I can't undo my silence, but I can be present going forward." Harold helped his youngest son carry boxes into a nearby apartment. Their relationship slowly rebuilding through actions rather than apologies. Wednesday evening, their kitchen filled with chosen family. Rosa brought her grandmother, whose tears of joy mixed with gratitude. Marcus arrived with his partner, carrying court documents that would become templates for future elder abuse cases. Sandra brought her children, who treated the Winters like honorary grandparents. Eugene and Claire Washington brought champagne. Jim and Mary Collins brought lasagna. Margaret stood at her stove, in her kitchen, in her home, and watched this gathered family laugh and share stories. Harold carved turkey with steady hands while Tommy helped serve. "To the county vault," Rosa raised her glass, which remembered when everyone else tried to forget. "To the vault," they echoed. Margaret caught Harold's eye across their crowded kitchen. 56 years of marriage had taught them to speak without words. His small smile said everything. "We survived, we're home, we're not alone." The deed hung framed in their hallway now, a testament that some promises, like some love, were meant to last forever. November arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything feel possible. Margaret stood before the state legislature's Elder Affairs Committee, her librarian's voice carrying through the chamber with quiet authority. Beside her, Harold presented their evidence binders, 40 years of payments transformed into legislative testimony. Financial elder abuse thrives in silence, Margaret told the assembled lawmakers. We survived because one notary chose conscience over profit, because neighbors chose action over indifference, because a young attorney chose justice over income. The bill passed unanimously 2 weeks later, strengthening protective laws and creating mandatory reporting requirements for notaries and financial institutions. Patricia appeared at family therapy sessions every Tuesday and Thursday throughout November, her attendance consistent even when the conversations turned difficult. She'd left Doug, found her own apartment, returned to nursing part-time. I can't undo what I did, she told them during a particularly raw session. But I can show up. I can be honest. I can try to earn back even a fraction of your trust. Margaret watched her daughter choose courage over comfort week after week, saw genuine accountability replacing practiced tears. Forgiveness would take time, maybe years. But Patricia was finally doing the work. Tommy relocated in early December, taking a position with a local tech company. He spent weekends helping Harold install additional security measures, establishing proper financial safeguards, creating systems that protected without infantilizing. I'm not asking you to forget, Tommy said one Saturday afternoon, teaching his father to use encrypted file storage. I'm just trying to become someone worthy of eventual forgiveness. Harold's hand found his son's shoulder. You already are. You chose truth when it mattered most. December 20th brought news from the district attorney. Bradley had accepted a plea agreement rather than face trial. 5 years in federal prison for elder financial abuse, wire fraud, and filing false documents. The other victims would receive restitution from his seized assets. Margaret felt no triumph in her eldest son's conviction, only the quiet satisfaction of justice served and future victims protected. Christmas Eve arrived with snow that softened their quiet street into something magical. The house filled with chosen family at 4 o'clock. Rosa arrived first with her grandmother, whose embrace carried the weight of shared survival. Marcus brought his partner James, carrying homemade tamales. Sandra came with her children, who immediately recruited Harold for a board game. Eugene and Claire Washington brought champagne. Jim and Mary Collins brought their famous lasagna and stories that made everyone laugh. Patricia arrived last, alone, carrying uncertainty and hope in equal measure. Margaret met her at the door, saw her daughter's tentative expression, and made a choice. Come in, Margaret said, opening the door wider. You're part of this family, even when it's complicated. The evening unfolded with the comfortable chaos of people who'd chosen each other through crisis and emerged as family. Harold carved turkey with Tommy's help, while Rosa set the table. Margaret found herself surrounded by conversations, laughter, the simple miracle of safety and belonging. At midnight, after everyone had left except Rosa, who insisted on helping clean, Margaret stood in her hallway looking at the framed deed. County stamp from 1983, property description in careful typewriter script, their signatures young and hopeful. The vault remembered, Rosa said softly, joining her. So did we, Margaret replied, even when they tried to make us forget. Some promises, like some love, were meant to last forever.